whenever a chapter comes out, I like personally, this is for me. Like, there's always that, like, do I want to wait a little bit to review? Like, is it one of those like moments where I'm so hyped on events going that I really want to get to it right now? Is it one of those chapters where, you know, there's so many smaller things going on that it takes some time to think about it, or like some just big reveals or anything that just makes you sit for a moment and kind of just, again, contemplate things? Because there's, like, for example, I remember in just the chapter right before that that Suzaku was revealed to be the one that Ferris ran into in Ellentir. I remember when I was doing just like a estimation on the chapter, it was like the last 30 seconds where I was making some guesses like, well, it could be Suzaku. And it's like moments like that where it's like, oh, fantastic. I'm glad I took a moment to kind of not just rush through it. And maybe not rush, but just jump to. Anyway, the whole bit of this chapter, though, I actually recorded this like 3 or 4 times. But it was at the point of when this chapter came out, I read it, waited like an hour or so, read it again, just to see if there's anything in particular that really made me just go, okay, well, this is what I want to kind of focus on. But like the issue the issue was, at that point I had been awake for like 20 hours. So I kept falling asleep for a moment, and then like I'm sure other people have had this happen when you're so tired, where you'll be talking and then you'll, like, 5 seconds pass by, 10 seconds pass by, and you realize you have no idea what you were just talking about. I just thought that was kind of funny. But this chapter, I'm so happy that it, again, waited more than 5 seconds to make a judgment call on Selene, because Selene was not freed and not off-paneled by the time that she showed up here with Wendy. She just seemed to have gotten to where Wendy ran into Selene, and then Selene opened a portal, Wendy went after her. I'm very curious again, though, as to what the events that led up to it. Like, did Wendy take a moment with the Diablos members, talk to them, try and figure things out? Where are they? What's going to happen with them? Because they're the weird ones, in my opinion, about where characters are going to be right now, of, say, like, adding in, because they are the only for sure ally group that Fairy Tail has right now. And, you know, obviously you look at different squads throughout the verse itself and different factions that they've teamed up with. I honestly, other than like Brandish, if Brandish shows up with some of the Alvarez people, they're relatively the only, I would say not dependable, but dependable to the point where they're going to be relevant in strength to show up to fight any of the current people, like any of the Fire and Flames members or any of the Horacio and Sex members, and anybody else that might show up that we don't know about yet. But when you look at that, it's like, okay, well, Diablos, even their weakest members, like, it doesn't take much. You really can just look at some of the feats, and you could say, like, the weakest members are definitely, like, in the Spriggan territory, and we know the upper people with the Dark Dragon Slayer Knights are able to contend with the human forms and beat the human forms of Dragon Gods. So there's a very accessible and proven level of strength from Diablos. And it's like, even Madmol, who has like barely any direct showing, says him just having stuff like being able to tank attacks from Natsu and Elfman is actually really impressive. And there's somebody like Elfman. Elfman's like only thing is literally just raw offense and like physical strength and defense. He's terrible at speed. If Elfman actually had decent speed, he would be able to contend with he would have been able to probably fight Algae a lot more, but he just gets completely outmatched into any relevant person at that stage that is, able to keep up with other people at their level in terms of speed, whereas Elfman is not. But, as it were, we don't have anybody besides Wendy and Gray on the Fairy Tail side showing up. And, seemingly I would assume that's not really a big problem, because, like, right out of the gate, Viernes and Selene start clashing. They just start throwing hands and really just trying to, having confrontation with each other, similar to how when we had Ignia and Selene. I would assume, like, my assumption that it wasn't going to just turn into a full all-out fight between these two, just because if that happened and they went their human, or if they stayed in their human forms, I could see Wendy and Gray being able to do anything and keep up and contend. And it's like, well, Gray needs certain feats to kind of get that gap directly. Like, he's got that rival potential, Mishima's talked about it and whatnot, but we haven't seen it directly shown in the recent events. And then same thing with Wendy, where Wendy has this high level of capability, utility, and extreme versatile magic with enchanting. It doesn't mean they're going to be able to directly for sure keep up with either of these two if they really just went into a fight like head on. But on top of that, the second they go in their dragon forms, neither of these two really have any fight right now, because the only person that has any back pocket thing of being like, okay, let's see if this will work. Like, I don't say backpocket like directly like control. It's like Natsu with his theorist side. He is one of the only people that like through some form of power that he can't directly control, but we know is dormant, can get up to that level and can compete with them. Where it's like anybody else, there has to be a lot of information and explanation of why they're suddenly Dragon God level. So like if Gray was able to suddenly contend with any of them even to like a real degree, or like maybe if he does more alchemy stuff and it has less to do with power levels and more of like technique knowledge and whatnot and creativity, you would run into a scenario like that where it wouldn't be as much of a problem for him. But at the same time, it's like you would have to make an argument for Gray to be able to get up to Viernez's level. I think it'd be really cool if we had one of those fights where it's like Gray is like maybe catches his attention and it's clear that he's going to lose, but there's a level of acceleration and like picking it up that like Viernez is just like, huh, and he sees like just something interesting there coming out of that just general encounter. And then maybe later they have a moment again. But I don't know. Again, it's weird just because Gray is the one that has the oddest spot in this. And even with Wendy showing up, it doesn't seem like they're going to be doing a team up on Viernez. I know Celine looks like she's going to be helped, but at the same time, I don't know if that's going to be directly... Yeah, now she's going to fight and Gray is not going to. I don't think it'd be a good idea, personally, in a lot of ways. Because there's the idea like they could free... Viernez from the locker that's in him. I don't really think that would change his stance in a lot of areas. Maybe he'd be a little bit more cooperative just because we don't really know too much, if anything, about him. We only know that he doesn't have much of a liking for humans, but he isn't as outwardly spiteful and malicious about it like Alderaan is. He definitely doesn't like humans and he talks down to them, but it doesn't look like Viernez goes out of his way to just, cause misery to humans. It seems more so because obviously he turns himself to a concept. I don't imagine he's a dragon that interacts with a lot of people and likes to. It's probably one of those scenarios where he prefers being alone, but he knows that any time that because imagine if you're a dragon too, and it's something like this where it's anytime you run into somebody that you aren't on immediate good terms with and you just immediately fight, you just immediately clash at each other. But Celine starts to use some moves. I really like seeing how Celine's general moon dragon abilities look when she is in her human form, and it's like seeing a dragon slayer without them being a dragon slayer, because obviously a dragon slayer, you are a human taking on the powers and abilities of a dragon and slowly turning into a dragon, whereas like in this state, this is a dragon in human form but is pulling out the powers of her dragon self. So it's almost like being a dragon slayer without actually being a dragon slayer, which I think is pretty cool. But she uses this new move where she does like a whole chant for it, and the energy around her hand does this cool like moon appearance where it looks like it's not a full moon because it's slightly waxed. I don't know exactly the stages of the moon. Sorry if there's a moon fan out there that really is looking over their poster and angry that I don't know all the stages of the moon. But she does this really cool like giant artillery move where I would assume from the moon itself, it calls down just this massive torrent of light beams, kind of like Holy Ray from Sting, but specifically, larger scale and moon orientated. I want to know at some point if we're going to get any, like, anything when it comes to moon abilities that has, like, a power addition. Because there has been stuff in the verse that's like, oh, well, moon powers have the ability to dispel magic. And we know that from back in Galuna Island and the Belianese people. So it's like, okay, well, could we get something like that with Celine? Like a direct, because we have stuff that is implied with some of the powers, but not directly stated. Like with Suzaku's Sword Saint dragon slaying magic, he cuts other magics and they like turn red and seem to decay, but we don't have a direct like this is what this does. It just seems that there is some form of effect added. But Selena's just doing her thing. I'm very pleased to see how she fights in her human form. I mean, in her dragon form, it's the same thing, but I don't imagine you would have a lot of time to really see it in most cases because it would just be a lot of calamity. But she's just like, doing her attacks, immediately just moving around in portals. She doesn't have to, dash around. She can just directly go from point A to point B through distorting space and goes for a melee attack right behind Viernez. And it's cool that her kick makes a crescent moon shape. I'm curious to know, just like, again, it's like in the idea of the attack itself, if the shape itself is just purely for, okay, it's just the nod at the moon thing, or would it be implying that she also has a level of sharpness? Like, imagine if, like, she used that on something that wasn't, Viernez, it was just like a wall. Would it create, like, a crescent moon style slash? I just dropped my mouse. But On top of that, Viernes in this chapter did really well. I do want to give Viernes some props. He also, I don't think he said a word the entire chapter. Let me see. He might have said something to Celine, but I don't think so. I don't think he said a single word to him. I think he made sounds. I think he just went like, It's annoying because I want to learn more about him because he is such an interesting design, and he's so much different than the other Dragon Gods, which they've all been. I've really liked that. I've mentioned that a lot. I don't think I've done it as much recently just because Viernes was the last one we got to, and his had a really weird flavor that it gave us because seemed like it was cut short, but it was because the next arc was literally going to be getting into this. But I want to know more about this guy and see just what he does, but like I'm very happy this chapter. It doesn't look like he was damaged at all. Like even his hat and stuff isn't damaged because like Celine goes for an attack, does hit, but like at the same time he counters, does like a hand motion, and he has the ground that is now gold turn into a giant fist and then just go and slam into Celine. I'm so curious if we're going to get any silver, well in this case I guess gold claimer references if you've read Wraith Master. Just as like a thing for if you haven't, there's one of the main characters, like main cast members, has a power where he can control silver, and there is like it's similar to like Dragon Slaying and God Slayers in their verse, and in just this scenario where it's like you have God Slayers are like the gold claimers, and it seems like they're better, but it seems like it just has like a default like, yeah, this is more powerful directly, but it doesn't have the same level of peaks that you can reach, and that's how Dragon Slaying magic is always seemingly compared to God Slayers. But Celine and Viernes are just going back and forth, just hitting each other with attacks. Because they're not they are landing. They're not doing really any visible damage. Because even after like they both get direct hits on each other, Celine goes for like a palm strike. Viernes blocks it with his forearm. And again, this is just one-armed in their human form. The shockwaves are sending Gray and Wendy and Carla all back. But at the same time, like neither of them really seem like they're having any issue. I mean, we know that they're equal. I don't imagine that the Dragon Gods, like, there has to be a level of one is slightly at a better advantage versus this one, but we know that they don't want to fight each other because all it would take is like, oh yeah, you beat one of them, and by the skin of your teeth, now one of the other ones that's not hurt is just going to come up, finish the job, and now all they had to do is wait, and then now there's two less. And even when they're talking about, Carlos like, should we just let them take care of each other? When he's like, yeah, that's not a good idea. Like, if we just let these two fight, like this entire place is gone. Like it's all absolutely just gone. But she also understands that Celine is not doing this out of her free will. We don't know the exact details on the whole Lacrima controlling and stuff and whatnot. We know it does it, but we don't know exactly like, oh, it does this thing, and then like you have, it's like, oh well. It similar to like again like the idea of the whiteout where it's like there's a difference between like full mind control and it's like, oh, this you have the same personality really, but it's like your allegiances switch, so it in your way that you demonstrate you act similar, but it's like you've always been on X side or you've always had this thought. It's just that style of manipulation. We don't have that with the Dragon Lacrima right now, but that's something I'm guessing we're going to be getting in the next couple chapters, just because from this there was a whole bit of what's going on with the Lacrima, and I'm guessing that's going to be one of the reasons why it was a lot easier for Mercphobia, is at some point apparently the Lacrima just gets absorbed into their body, and maybe that's what happened with Alderaan, and that's why Alderaan was able to come back. But Mercphobia, because he was able to get stopped very early, maybe he's going to be a way that they can kind of figure out around it. And because Wendy just does like the separation enchantment in this chapter, they want to still fight. Gray does his thing as he takes his shirt off. He's starting to get a little more serious. I'm not too sure how I feel about that from a combat standpoint, because I understand from Gray, but you see Gray still has gold on his shirt, so the gold effect, or like the effect of turning something that Viernes touched into gold, didn't go through Gray's shirt. It went through Gray's shirt. I imagine like if he held his hand there, it would be able to get through, but just that quick moment, it clearly was blocked by the shirt. So maybe not the best idea, Gray. Maybe if Gray does something where he freezes part of his body right before he gets touched, so it like a sheet of ice gets turned into gold, but then it just falls off. Maybe like he needs to think real smart about this, because when it comes to Viernes' level of like raw Dragon God power, that's clearly going to be a problem for Gray at the moment. But it's Gray's whole aspect of the second that Viernes goes into his dragon form, there's nothing really that Gray can do. And I know there's always that possibility of something up and coming, like as Celine gets her her control, maybe she opens a portal and it's like this is a dimension compiled that's frozen, entirely frozen. It's just ice, and maybe she sends him over there, or like summons a demon, and like, or even just like here's like this thing. Like I mentioned this. Let me throw an idea out there. Gray, she summons this ice demon, and it's like if you beat him, they'll be like you'll be way more powerful, or sends him somewhere. And Selena's just like, I'll just fight him until you get back, because we know that she's not gonna want to directly like 1v1 all in fight Viernes. Like maybe she would, in she would if the scenario came for it, but I know that the dragon gods don't want to if they can help it, just because the damage is permanent. They are relatively equal, so the only one I would say that has an edge on any others is Ignia, just because I feel like that's obvious. Maybe not now for sure, but like at some point he's definitely going to be the biggest one out of 6. But as it is, like I said, Gray took off his shirt just do his normal thing as Gray to show he's a little bit more serious. I thought it was actually kind of funny that if you look at Gray's face, and it's not like he took a lot of damage, but he just got kind of like some scrapes and stuff. But like he took off his shirt, and his entire, because his shirt and stuff is damaged and his hands are damaged because he's hurt, but his entire portion of his body that was again covered with clothing was not hurt at all. He's perfectly fine. So it's like really like he was just taking, and again I think that's a sign that he just didn't take a lot of damage, and again showing to him that when guarding there is a level of area that is just he's able to help so much, but still it's still a nod at Gray's strength, even if Viernes wasn't going all out. And again, it's a very minor thing, just because it's like, okay, this shows that Gray wasn't being as super pushed, and we know that Gray didn't go all out in the last chapter or pull out anything crazy. But at the same time, it's a visual confirmation, and it shows too that he's not tired. He doesn't have any big wounds. He just suffered from like opening scratches, opening little bruises. And Wendy does give him the Dragon Slayer buff, gives him the Dragon Slayer seal that gives him the attribute so he can do damage to Viernes. Very curious as to what, again, that's going to do as the fight opens, because he hits Viernes, again, with a longsword. He uses his Ice Demon's longsword. I'm still wondering if they're going to... I liked it when it was like, when it was Zeroth, and not Zero. Like the fact that it was, I remember when the first chapter came out and it stated Zero, and instantly I'm like, there's a character in the verse named Zero. Why are they naming it Zero? Unless it's supposed to be something that we know of later. Is Ice Demon Zero? Is this one going to be a name of or rather, is this one going to be a demon that we're going to see at some point? I think it'd be really cool if we had like an actual character named, like a demon named Zero, and it's like some absolute Zero ice demon thing. And Zero himself took the code name because he heard of this like ruthless demon from like the frosty tundra, something like that, where it's kind of like Acnologia. We found out the original Acnologia, and we still don't know the Dr. Acnologia's name, but it adds to the verse and history in a way that, again, it doesn't have to be crazy, but it's just like, oh cool, that actually expands some world really nicely. But he hits this dude directly with it, and this isn't Gray's strongest attack, but it's one of Gray's strongest known attacks. And it doesn't do anything to him. So I can't wait to see more of this fight. Like the thing is, I can see Gray pushing himself and like really getting, like, without having to do anything like insanely new, fight like one of the human level dragon gods. But it's when he gets into his dragon form that I'm just like Gray would have to have something so significantly like increasing that he would be able to, again, just to get to that point. I kind of am hoping that Selene gives him some form of buff to where he's clearly more powerful, or at least powerful enough to fight human Viernes just fine, but Viernes doesn't go into his human form because there's a level of interest, kind of like with Selene and when she found out about like Suzaku and like his guild and stuff, and she wanted to go back there. If Viernes has some form of reason, like I said, I've had this idea that he's going to be interested in Gray and find Gray to be a some form of potential weapon or tool for him. There's so many nods about alchemy with Gray. I just feel like there has to be something that comes of it, especially when you put Gray directly with Viernes. And even after Selene and Wendy show up, it's still like, okay, well, Gray's going to be going at Viernes while Wendy is doing something else. So one, it was really cool just to see Wendy go about her normal, always able to pull through, always able to to really show that she is like one of the best people in the guild and one of the more valuable members of the team. Because facts are, like, Wendy is like what has to be, like, if you're not counting Natsu, because Natsu's the main character, he always ends up you know, doing the final crucial thing, like beating the main boss, or doing some form of main thing that leads up to the main boss defeat, kind of like with Hades doing the speech. But Wendy's like the MVP to everything, because I mean, she's a healer that also fights and also solves problems and has utility and is able to break buffs, and she's able to seemingly help, like, in a lot of like enemy to enemy relationships. She just seems to be so polite and whatnot that like it's hard for other characters to be rude to her in a lot of scenarios. But as it were, she, like, in this chapter, it was really cool to see, one, even though Celine, who is way more powerful than her and stuff, like, she's just going to go for like a general hand energy blast. But Wendy's able to just push her back with enough wind, just enough to get to where it knocks her off her footing. And then Carla, surprised Carla was at the ready. I wonder if they've strategized with this. It's like this idea. They're like, listen, I need you to always be ready to vault me. But Wendy goes for some cool backflip, and Carla, like, vaults her off, kind of like how Urza and Gray did to Natsu during the Hades fight, and shoots her directly at Celine. I'm so curious, is, like, did she, I can't think of another instance where she had this attack. I know the translations is sword edge. I'm gonna always call it sword horn. I don't care. I can't remember a time, at least off the top of my head, where she used this. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but like, I'm just trying to remember if there's another time where because I know Wendy's got like her wing attack. She's got like the, oh god, I'm trying to, like, what is that one? It's like that makes that just general giant like tempest. She used it. Oh my, I know she used it in a couple bits with like the fight against Alvarez and Avatar and like areas like that. I'm probably forgetting like one part or like mixing up a point. Like, I know, like, most of her moves, there's probably something I'm forgetting, but I know that Wendy has a lot of moves that is either, like, very own Wendy attack, or she's got, you know, some form of imitation of what, like, Natsu and stuff's doing, which makes sense. Always happy, too, as well, to see the Dragon Ball reference when she ends up, like, headbutting right into Celine's stomach, and just kind of, you know, it doesn't do any real damage. I would imagine it's just something that shocked her, and something that kind of just knocked the wind out of her for a moment, because right afterwards, even when it's still like I would imagine like a split second in the moment after Wendy hitting her, Celine is like staring at her. It's like, what? You know, she's clearly not just like so dazed in that moment. She's able to be fully caught off without any resistance. I mean, clearly here she's shocked, but it's not like Wendy hit her and then that's like, oh, you have 5 seconds until she becomes fully conscious again and then responds. It seems like it hit her and she had a moment, but like she was still, you know, she still sustained a level of control. It was just that Wendy was just very quick on it. But Wendy grabs her after she slams in, uses the separation enchantment, because she says it like after she saw, after Gray was talking to her, she figured out that the Lacrima was inside of Celine. And she used the separation enchantment to push it out of her body. And Carla went and destroyed it. I'll be honest, I'm pretty impressed that Carla was able to contribute. The Lacrima doesn't seem the full size. My belief is that they have to do that maybe a few times, because the Lacrima was really big. So I would assume that they have to just, like, if Wendy's fight is she has to just, you know, maintain enough, like being able to maintain enough magic to use the separation enchantment a couple more times, be able to fight, and like maybe just have Carla doing like support to keep Wendy from getting hit. Maybe she's just doing stuff to kind of like, you know, Happy style rushes in, grabs her, moves her out of an attack, you know, in a way that she wouldn't have been able to normally do because of how, you know, doing on her own. Well, like, okay, maybe she moved at a certain point, it was a bad footing point, but Carla swoops in, has flight and whatnot, moves her out of the way. Especially too, like, I wonder what kind of bonuses she could do with just having somebody with such free flight. Like, could Wendy just fly up into the sky and then go to where, like, way above the cloud layer where the air is like way more, just, I don't know, would it be cleaner up there, or just way more like, I guess it'd be thinner. Maybe it'd be like, oh, well, the magic is higher up here though because of something, like it doesn't get directly absorbed into the ground, absorbs the magic and is able to do something. Because like you could give Wendy a buff and like just give Wendy some form, like maybe the adult Wendy that, or I guess is it adult older Wendy that we saw in Ellen tier, to where she is able to contend even if Selene turns into a dragon, because the idea wouldn't be to defeat her, it would be to get the openings to push these bits of Lockerma out of her body, so then you could get her back on your side. And it's going to be this, like, one, that fight is going to be a big determiner, of the tone of where it's going to be when we get back to Gray. Because I would prefer if we get Wendy and Selene in a fight where it's more of, it's, Wendy, like, if Wendy's bit is showing, okay, well, she used to only be able to do one separation enchantment when she first learned it. Maybe she gets to, 4 or 5. Just by sheer numbers, we know that's a big level of progress. Maybe be able to enchant and use that grown form as well. There's just things that, like, it'd be really cool to see what she pulls out and brings to the table. Because if her thing, again, isn't to fully defeat Selene, it's just to get this Lockerma out, and then Selene turns back into how she is normally. That would be a much more reasonable way, where it's like, even if you did that to Viernes, as far as we know, Viernes isn't going to side with us, so he could just keep attacking. But with Selene, it also leaves up, like, will Selene, like, if say, like, this is all they needed, so I would assume that Selene would be, like, unconscious next chapter, and she wouldn't be able to directly fight, or maybe it'd be kind of like how she was after her fight with Ignia, where she's just, like, she can't really fight herself, but she can still use her powers to a degree in terms of support and aid. Again, Gray's is the one that right now I'm most intrigued about, because his is the one that's the weirdest, and I would say it's the hardest one to realistically get over right now for him. But also, I know that he's got to get something really cool here. Like, there has to be something for Gray's addition that is going to help him close this gap, or at least just keep him grounded in this scenario. Because the problem is, again, Viernes is just such a hard opponent. It's not like, again, with Mercphobia and Selene, once they get uncontrolled, they go back to being an ally. You get the control off of Viernes, relatively the same, if not more violent, I would assume. But as it were. Anyway, the chapter itself, again, it was funny because I think when I recorded this morning, it was maybe like 15-20 minutes, because I was like, yeah, this is a pretty good chapter. I mean, I feel like there's not too crazy stuff to talk about, but I feel personally, for me, one, like, it's like Gray hypothesizing, Gray just brainstorming to figure stuff out, to the nice display of combat skills, as well as Dragon Ball references from Wendy. Just the information on the Lockermas as well, Viernes' performance, the fact that neither Viernes and Selene and Selene was only hit by a few attacks, but so was Viernes, and Viernes didn't even guard, seemingly, with Gray. So it's definitely impressive that they just, they are going to the next chapter without any real damage. And Selene was just hit by Wendy, but even then, it doesn't look like it really did anything other than just kind of being like, it's like a little kid running into you. It might just make you, oh, shit. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but you're also like a third of my size and 100th my power level. But anyway, other than that, like I said, comment below, tell me your thoughts about this chapter. I mean, it wasn't like a crazy, like, oh yeah, we now have this brand new Psycho event that just took place. I think it was a really good chapter in terms of giving us an idea of the direction, as well as the characters involved. It reassured us stuff with Gray and Viernes, again with Selene and Wendy. There was a lot in this that was just nice to know, given that last chapter's sudden end with Selene and Wendy showing up. And I've mentioned that before. Selene is a very crazy character, because the fact that she can just show up anywhere, and that she is so powerful that she can also bring almost any character in the verse anywhere she feels like it. And there's only a handful of people that can, like, contend and fight back against her from doing that in the first place. But anyway, other than that, like I said, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend, like button, subscribe, and check out my videos. But check out but I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.